So good evening, everyone who's joining us digitally as well. Thanks, Wendy. It's our Wednesday night Dharma talk again. And we're beginning tonight, for those joining us, just to situate you, we begin this evening at 7:45, kind of resident-only sesshin. So it'll just be about a few times a year we do this. It's a shorter sesshin, 3 full days, 4 nights. And we'll practice together in the Zendo. And this time, a handful of residents will be giving a talk, not just one talk a day, there'll be 2 talks each day. And the only kind of frame is to give a talk on one of Dogen's fascicles, so a fascicle in the Shobogenzo. And so since I can't escape those directions myself, I am going to give a talk tonight on one of Dogen's fascicles. But before I do, I just want to recall kind of some wonderful things that have happened and a little bit of where we are in the world right now. So we've been in quarantine. We've been in a kind of cordoned off pod here since March of last year. Is that right? Wow. So for over a year. And just last week, we had the local Sangha come sit with us behind the Zendo. And there were 20 some odd of us sitting together, and some people brought home extra tomato plants we had, and there was kind of chattering behind Mass, and it was absurdly social all of a sudden, and really wonderful, like a certain part of our community coming home, a certain part of us coming home to the practice of Sangha. So to acknowledge, just here at least, so many of us are starting to step out of what we've been in for over a year. And also to acknowledge the incredible hardship in other places around the world. India has been on our minds a great deal recently. Our dear friends in Nepal, who we generally would go spend time with every year, who are in the midst of the pandemic like we were, many months ago. It's hitting them now like that. And Colombia and Brazil, and the epicenter has shifted, and this isn't over. And that those communities, those cultures, those families are very much in our hearts and minds. And the fighting, the bombing, the pretty much one-sided war going on in the Middle East is also very much on our minds. And as someone with Jewish heritage and whose extended family survived the Holocaust, there's a kind of heartbreak in this, that to survive only to be embroiled in this kind of suffering making, it is beyond reason. So we have been bearing witness to that here these past 10 days as well. And we are also a week past the Varela Symposium, which is this incredible annual gathering of neuroscientists and philosophers and Buddhist practitioners about kind of the latest thinking in this intersection of mind sciences and the Dharma. And it's very heady. If you didn't get a chance to be part of it, you can sign up and view these incredible presentations and discussions. And so we're kind of recovering this week by opening up into the expanse of silence that is sesshin, and by coming back to the very heart of our practice, Dogen's teachings, the spirit of Dogen. And in a way, Zen, none of this would be here without Dogen. There are many ancestors, but the heart of the practice for us in this lineage comes from his kind of revitalizing of the Dharma. And so when we come back to him. And during difficult times of war and pandemic, we come back to what wisdom is there for us. So, so in that spirit, and with a great deal of gratitude to this community of practice, knowing that around the world there are places of practice that are being threatened, to be able to practice like this is a rare gift, really. So in that spirit, I want to just jump into a Dogen fascicle. And it was inspired by Richie Davidson, who's one of the neuroscientists who spoke for us, spoke in the Varela Symposium to us. And I chose it kind of in the spirit of this sesshin, which is, get uncomfortable with the text. I don't know this fascicle very well. And so I was reading with beginner's mind. It was really, I'm sure I've come across it a few times. I had some highlights of it in my Kindle, but that was a long time ago. So the fascicle is the 30th scroll or fascicle in the Shobogenzo, at least in Kaz's translation, and it's called Thusness. And the way that I ended up at it was Richie was talking about microdosing, really good clickbait for an academic talk. And he was talking about microdosing kind of awareness or practice, that small periods of dropping into, of pausing, of dropping into awareness and appreciation could have profound effects. So kind of science giving us some evidence of maybe what we already know. But he was asked at one point afterwards by Amy Varela, I think, well, what are you microdosing? And he said, we're microdosing view, which is a kind of mystical thing to say. And maybe the language of Vajrayana Buddhism, which is his practice. And so I was looking for, okay, what would view mean to Dogen? And I think he might call it suchness. We're microdosing suchness or thusness. And Dogen would probably not even say that. He'd probably say thusness is microdosing us or something like that. Or we're microdosing and it's microdosing us and neither and both, something. You'll get a sense for that in a moment. So just because, Buddhism is a big tent. And in fact, even in this fascicle, Dogen says, now people like to create schools and call their practice after a school, but really there are no schools. He says, there's just the Dharma. So in the spirit of a kind of big tent, I want to begin with a quote Richie started with, which is from the third Karmapa, which has such resonance with what we'll read in Dogen. So the third Karmapa, and this is, he was born in 1284, so this is around that time, he, probably early 14th century. He writes something called the Aspiration of the Mahamudra. And this is what he writes. May the stream of effortless experience flow without ceasing. Clinging to good experiences is freed on its own. The confusion of negative thoughts is naturally purified into basic space. Ordinary mind is beyond being accepted or rejected. It cannot be lost or gained. Beings have always been Buddhas by their very nature. Yet, not knowing this, they wander endlessly in samsara. In the moment of love, with the unceasing force of unbearable compassion, the truth of the empty the truth of the empty essence nakedly dawns. In the moment of love, with unceasing force and unbearable compassion, the truth of the empty essence nakedly dawns. This unity is the unerring path. So that's the third Karmapa. This is Dogen. And this is Dogen again, the title is emo or thusness or suchness. And it's long, and I'm just going to start with the beginning, and then we'll see how far we get. Yunju, great master Hongzhi of Mount Yunju, an heir of Dongshan, is the 39th generation Dharma. I'm going to make this larger so I can read it. Is the 39th generation Dharma descendant of Shakyamuni Buddha. He is an authentic ancestor of the Dongshan school. One day he said to the assembly, "You are trying to attain thusness, yet you are already a person of thusness. As you are already a person of thusness, why be worried about thusness?" So this is Dogen now. It means that one who aspires to experience thusness is immediately a person of thusness. If so, why be worried about thusness? So this is Dongshan, who we're gonna, in January of next year, look deeply during the practice period at the Jewel Mirror of Awareness Sutra, or Samadhi of Jewel Mirror Awareness. Is that the full title? Which we chant once a week. So you've probably heard it if you join us for liturgy. And he's said to be the author of it. And so this is his words, saying, "You are trying to attain thusness, yet you are already a person of thusness. As you are already a person of thusness, why be worried about thusness?" Dogen goes on, "For the time being, we will regard the teaching of Yunju, immediately getting to the unsurpassable enlightenment, as thusness. Within this unsurpassable manifestation of enlightenment, the entire world of the 10 directions is but a small portion. Enlightenment exceeds the boundary of the entire world. You are an accoutrement that exists in the entire world of the 10 directions. How do you know it to be thus? You know it because your body and mind are not you. They appear in the entire world of the 10 directions. Your body is not you. Your life is transported, moving in time without stopping, even for a moment." So that makes sense, right? We can microdose that. Just already being thusness, body moving in the entire, yeah. Sure, he was like, sure. Okay, so I'm going to start with the title, as one does, and then I'm going to come back to this. Your body is not you? Okay. So thusness, and I end up saying multiple words, so I'm going to do this so you don't get confused. We know it by just thisness or suchness, or even the Tathagata. When we say the Tathagata, this is where the word comes from. Tata being just as it is-ness, or just this-ness, and gata being the verb to come or to go. So the thus come one is often how we translate Tathagata, or the thus gone one. But it actually has this embedded in it. The just as it is, reality just as it is, arrived or come. That's our word for the Buddha. And so this word has a kind of obvious importance in the Dharma. And then as the practice moves to China, it's given a kind of colloquialism, very commonly used word, emo. And this Chinese idiom, I don't know if that's the current Chinese idiom or a kind of old version of it, is very much like our word such. So we might say, it's such a beautiful day. We're saying it's a beautiful day, but it's also kind of beyond just beautiful. There's something more to it. Or we might do something stupid, like say reply all to an email that we meant to just reply to one person to. I don't know if you've ever done that. And I'll say something like, wow, I'm such an idiot. Such makes it specific. I'm an idiot in this way. and enacted. And like in that way, in that specific time, I'm such an idiot. And so such somehow points to or touches the life of the thing. I'm this kind of profound. I'm not some ideal or platonic notion of an idiot. I'm this kind of profound, this moment of an idiot. And so the expression includes the context of experience and time, refers back to itself. And in this way, we might say such beauty is also the beauty of suchness, or we might say such idiocy is also the idiocy of suchness. It has that kind of relation attitude. And so this is one way in the literature to understand suchness. And another way that we often refer to it is just as Maizumi Roshi would say, just the appreciation of life. So as an expression of how absurdly impressive, how dumbfoundingly beautiful life is. The thatness, the thisness, the suchness of life. And so sometimes we do this, right? We have practices. The one I've recently enjoyed is, just looking at like your hand or your body and realizing that there are trillions of cells in here, maybe billions in my hand, trillions in the whole body. And that all of these cells, some of them are DNA, some of them not, many of them not, all work together in a kind of concert we can't fathom to move blood, to move skin, all of them in this kind of harmony and disharmony, all of them being born and dying, all of them comprising this thing we call ourself. That's crazy. That's nuts, right? And then we think that's nuts, and then we stop meditating, we go to lunch, and we sit at lunch, and we look at like a leaf or a fig, like you look at the inside of a fig, or just a grain of rice, and you're like, this has evolved over eons, and it's also all these millions of cells, and it tastes delicious. That's nuts. And that's enough, actually. So the suchness is to look at the thing, and that's enough. And it's not only enough when it's good. We could be incredibly ill, or in the middle of a divorce proceeding, or facing some former friend who is harboring incredible anger towards us, or us towards them. You could be anywhere in life, and that is still there. The extreme impressiveness of life doesn't disappear. There's a kind of just thisness to it, and the extreme impressiveness of our own capacity for anger and remorse and all the other things that might be arising. But it seems to be easier to notice it when you're looking at a fig. So I thought I'd use the example of a fig. So all these things are what we mean by thusness. So what does Dongshan and Dogen mean when they say, you're trying to attain this thusness, this genuineness, but you're already a person of thusness? Well, that seems pretty easy. But then he says, it means that one who aspires to experience thusness is immediately a person of thusness. And I don't know if it's worth dwelling so much on that here, except that this is the kind of formula we see throughout the Shobogenzo, which is aspiration and enlightenment, practice and realization arising together, co-arising. And so if we don't aspire to be genuine, if we don't aspire to be here, are we? And that might actually be putting it in the wrong way, but rather that we do. We aspire to be a person of suchness. We aspire to be fully ourselves. And thus we are. Not next, not after we aspire, not before, but at the same time. So this is tied up for Dogen in time. That this exists not as something we become or were, but as the flow of time, which is why he starts us off by thinking bigger. And he says, first, open up to the expanse of reality that exists in time. And maybe we can do this by thinking of our body as not us, he says. And even the mind, he says, is not you, but a facet of you. He says a facet of the entire world, but he means you are actually the entire world. And so that can be hard to swallow. So maybe we don't believe Dogen here. I think he kind of like sees this coming. And so he goes right to this rare moment where he just states a thing. He usually doesn't state a thing. He like goes around it many, many times. And then he kind of gestures to it. But he states the thing and he says, well, why is this so? He says it's so because your life is actually existence moving in time. Is that how Kozan translates it? Your life is transported, moving in time without stopping, even for a moment. Your life, in essence, he says, is time. If it weren't, you could step off. You could stop it. You could take a step off the merry-go-round of life, take a breath, step back on. But since this life is not separable from time, there's no stepping off. You can't stop time, no matter how powerful or rich or wise you are, even for a second. No amount of knowledge will get you there. And since this moment in time is all time, as we'll learn in Uji, which I think we'll talk about during the Sesshin, but it may not be aired, thus you're also all space. And I'm all space, and you're all space. And this is the way we're inseparable from one another. So, this accoutrement part, I'm actually not going to go into it, but that's how he relates this notion of this body and this body. So there's some relation there, and he points to it. That this infinite body is the kind of, this finite body rather, is the instrument of the non-finite body that can neither be enclosed by anything or diminished. So here's a bunch of things we can say, and Dogen says, about our experience. But then he says, of course, none of this is true. None of these statements are true. They're just an expression of movement through time. He says, even if there is truth, it does not stay within the boundary of yourself. And then he says, because of thusness, you arouse a boundless aspiration for enlightenment. Once this aspiration arises, you let go of what you've been playing with. You come forward to hear what you have never heard and realize what you have not yet realized. This is not at all self-doing. Know that it is so because you are a person of thusness. So once this aspiration arises, you let go of what you've been playing with. We know that feeling. You come forward, you hear what you've never heard, you realize what you have not yet realized. This is not self-doing. Know that it is because you are a person of thusness. You didn't have to make yourself a person of thusness. You didn't have to create what wasn't there. It's not achieving. You do have, and then what he said before at the top, you know it because you want to attain thusness. As you already have the face and eye of a person of thusness, do not worry about thusness now. Even if you worry, it is thusness not to be worried about. Also, do not be startled at the thusness of thusness. Here's where he starts to, Nicole's squinching her eyes. That's kind of how we feel when he starts doing this. But even if you worry, it is thusness not to be worried about it. Also, do not be startled at the thusness of thusness. as many ways as he can say it, he's going to say right where you are is thusness. You can't separate yourself from it. Even if there is thusness that you are startled at and wonder about, it is also thusness. It is thusness not to be startled at. Do not measure this with the yardstick of Buddha or mind. So do not call this Buddha, do not call it mind. Do not measure it with the yardstick of world or phenomena or the entire world. It is just, if you are already a person of thusness, why be worried about thusness? Okay, I'm really liking it, so I'm going to keep reading. So this being so, you're already a person of thusness. Why be worried about it? This being so, thusness of sound and form is thus. Thusness of body and mind is thus. Thusness of all Buddhas is thus. So it seems to get really fancy for a moment. He seems to be saying, you're a person of suchness and it's everywhere. And even if you're worried about suchness, don't be worried. It's still right there. And then he goes right back to, why be worried about it? You're already right where you are. And this is where it is, in sound, in form, in body, in mind, in the experience of the sun on your face, in the sound of the birds outside. This is where you already are. So he leaves us with a kind of grounding right here. Suchness right here, not over there. But maybe, as I am, you're still a little confused, or you think, what? Okay, so suchness is everything. Why do I care? Just thisness is impossible to turn away from. We've heard this before. So he gives us 6 stories, and I think I'm going to go through 2. And the first is a metaphor that I really like. And it starts with the notion of falling and picking ourselves up. He says, for example, when you understand the moment of falling to the ground as thusness, you will not doubt the moment of falling to the ground at the moment of getting up. So when you understand the moment of falling to the ground as thusness, you will not doubt the moment of falling to the ground at the moment of getting up. Since ancient times, he says, these words have been spoken in both India and the Deva worlds. Quote, one who falls to the ground uses the ground to stand up. One who ignores the ground and tries to stand up cannot. The meaning is that those who fall to earth stand up on the earth. It's impossible to get up without using the earth. Some people interpret this as great enlightenment, which is the desirable way to become free from body and mind. So this is like I hadn't heard this kind of axiom before, but it's a great lesson. What causes us to stumble, the ground we fall onto, is the same thing we use to pick ourselves back up. We can understand that as our poisons, our greed, our anger, our delusion. We've just been reading in our last practice period Shantideva, who talks about this a great deal, using anger to untie our anger, understanding our greed to be free of our greed. It's not a process of escape, it's a process of turning towards, he almost painfully understands the minutiae of the ground he's fallen onto, to use it to get back up. We can understand it, I think, in this pandemic. We don't drink smoothies and eat reishi mushrooms and meditate a lot to stand up from the pandemic. We actually use the virus itself. What do we use to inoculate ourselves? But the shape, the body, the spike proteins of the virus. We use the thing to push off and stand back up. And then this is also, I think, a kind of mantra of our moment in response to oppression, racism, that our instinct to kind of gloss over race and identity isn't how we stand up or heal, but the wisdom is not just to see beyond race, to see beyond oppression, but actually to use the ground of our history, to use the ground of understanding, not to become non-racist, but anti-racist, this notion that you go into to stand up from. So this is where Dogen starts. And then, you know, if you've read enough of him, you know what's coming. He says, thus, when being asked how Buddhas attain the way, they say that it is like those who fall to the ground and use the ground to stand up. Thoroughly investigate this, penetrate this view from the past, the future, and this very moment. But this being so, those who only understand thus, that is, using the ground to stand up, but miss beyond understanding thus, have not thoroughly studied this expression. Even though the expression of an old Buddha has been passed down thus, when you hear the expression of an old Buddha as an old Buddha, you should inquire beyond. So here's his little aside of, you know, don't take anything at face value. Even if it had not been spoken in India or in the Deva world, you should say something further in this way. If one who falls to the ground uses the ground to stand up, it is not possible, even for immeasurable eons. Here is one vital path for getting up. One who falls to the ground uses the sky to stand up. One who falls to the sky uses the ground to stand up. Without being thus, you can never get up. This has always been the way with all Buddhas and ancestors. So I like his language of certainty. You know, he doesn't say, well, when you fall to the ground, you could use the ground and the sky to get up. It's, you know, now you got to use the sky to get up. Try it that way. And I also just really love this image, you know, the notion of falling to the ground and like lifting up by the sky, being lifted up by space, almost like going from a solid to a gas, like just being risen. And extending our metaphor, it's also true. Who thinks it's true? Who has no idea what it means? Yeah, okay. That you use the sky to get up. You can comment in the comment section on YouTube too. Questions, or if you think it's true or not true, I'm curious. Who's ever used the sky to get up? Okay, Nicole has. Who's used the ground to get up? Okay, I just want to make sure you're all with me to some degree. Yeah, me too. So I'm not exactly sure what Dogen means, but I'm gonna make a go of it. It seems true to me that if we fixate on the ground, thinking the ground is how we get up, we tend to stay fixed to the ground. We tend to attend exclusively to the ground, eventually making it our whole world. Not the actual world, our whole world, just this patch of ground we find ourselves on. And eventually we may end up forgetting about the sky and the infinite surround altogether. And so I think this is Audre Lorde proclaiming the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. The ground we've fallen onto will never suffice in lifting us off the ground that holds us down. When we rise up, we do so in part or in whole by taking the sky's hand and expanding into a space where we haven't been before. And I think we all do this in our own way. Space is large enough that we may trip over the same ground and expand into unusual, unlikely, unexperienced space. So, there are ways in which we try to use the ground alone to rise up and we get stuck. The notions the examples that come to mind for me are kind of societal examples. So I think of, trying to overcome the ills of consumerism by including the opposite of consumerism in what we consume. So we put kind of charity into the cup of coffee, or we wear Tom's shoes instead of Nikes, or we bank at Aspiration Bank instead of Wells Fargo. We try and consume our way past consumerism. This is Zizek's favorite example. And I actually have a quote by him, but I'll spare us all. Oscar Wilde has a famous quote along these lines where he says, "It is immoral to use private property to alleviate the horrible evils that result from the institution of private property." And there's a budding movement, most closely associated with the Black Lives Movement, but there are many others that are less well known, that is about embracing the sky, acknowledging the earth and reaching for the sky, or letting it reach for us. One of the kind of co-creators of the Black Lives Matter movement, Alicia Garza, standing on the shoulders of Audre Lorde, talks about the importance of embracing difference, embracing joy, the joy of liberation, not just the righteousness of it, and embracing the creativity beyond the narrow parameters of progress defined by what the present structures of power allow for our future. So reaching beyond what we know, using the sky or allowing the sky to lift us up. But when we become fixated on the ground, as we tend to do, particularly when we find ourselves falling onto it often, how might we remember to also use the sky to stand up? Dogen kind of points to this. He says, you might remember by recalling that the ground too is filled with sky, that all things are filled with space. And actually, the word for sky and space, of course, in Chinese is the same, or Dogen's word for it would have been the same. So you could say it's filled with sky or filled with space. That the ground that holds us up is also the sky that holds us up. We cannot get up without the ground. We cannot get up without the sky. And so Dogen says, if one who falls to the ground uses the ground alone to stand up, it is not possible even for immeasurable eons. And so another way I've come to see this is a kind of enacted metaphor for the middle way. When we get lost in la-la land of the sky and religious experience and oneness, we can't use the sky to get up. We have to touch the earth, the ground of specificity of our body, of our foibles and human connections. And when this life is too heavy to bear and everything is a veil of misery, we can't use the ground to get up alone. We need the spaciousness of the sky. So, I'm sorry to go over, but I need to go to this next story. I can't leave it out. So we're going to be here for just a few more minutes. So that's him explaining suchness, pointing to suchness through this wonderful metaphor, the ground and the sky. And then he talks about Hongzhi, and the story of the sixth patriarch and some of his teachings, and he goes through the story of the flag flapping in the wind, and there's some commentary on that. And then he goes to Shito, great master Wuji of Mount Nanye. who was asked by Yaoshan. Yaoshan says to him, I have a rough idea of the three vehicles and the 12 divisions of the scriptures. I have heard of the teaching from the south, that is the kind of Zen of the south, about directly pointing to the human mind, seeing through one's nature and becoming a Buddha. I beg you, Reverend, please give me your compassionate instruction. So this is a question by Yaoshan, says Dogen, who had previously been a lecturer. He was well versed in the three vehicles and the 12 divisions. And this is where Dogen says, long ago, there was no particular school of Buddhism. So studying the three vehicles and the 12 divisions of scriptures was the only way. He says, this is his aside, nowadays, most people are dull and try to analyze Buddha Dharma by establishing various doctrines. Gives you the sense he'd be kind of ashamed that we call our practice Zen, like it wouldn't jive with him so well. He says, by establishing doctrines. This is not the Buddha way of awakening with Dharma. And then he gets back to Shito's investigation. He says, to this, Shito replies to Yaoshan, thusness is ungraspable, beyond thusness is ungraspable. Both thusness and beyond thusness are ungraspable. How about you? So this is a great retelling of a story he tells a few times through the Shobogenzo, where often it's translated as, sometimes I have him raise his eyebrow, sometimes I don't have him raise his eyebrow, sometimes it's enough, sometimes it's not enough, how about you? But here he's giving it to us directly. Sometimes thusness is ungraspable, and sometimes it's beyond ungraspable. How about you? And Dogen adds to this, this is Shito's statement for the benefit of Yaoshan. So just in case you think he's trying to trick him, Dogen always kind of adds this. No, this is him pointing to the way. So usually when we hear someone tell us that something is ungraspable, we say, oh, great, I can forget about that. Like, I'm going to put that aside. It's ungraspable, unattainable, unrealizable. I'll, forget about it as soon as I heard about it. But Shito doesn't mean to put us outside of what he's saying or have us just give up. And so I want to read how Norman Fisher puts this. He gave a talk on just this part of the story. He says, yes, it is ungraspable. You are not able to grasp it. So the usual strategy will not work. And yet you can train in this ungraspability. There's a point to continuing to practice with the knowledge that the real fruit of your practice will be ungraspable. You can live it, as you inevitably have to because you are already a person of suchness. If you practice, you will be able to appreciate your living it, but you still won't be able to grasp it. In fact, your feeling of it, of its ungraspability, will be your path in practice. You're asking me, Shito, so now he's kind of playing Yaoshan. That doesn't make sense. Maybe he says, you're asking me, Yaoshan, how do we do it? And I'm telling you how we do it. We do it by the path of ungraspability. If I gave you something to grasp, this is still Norman talking, even if it were a very difficult thing, eventually perhaps you could grasp it. But that wouldn't be what you came here looking for. That would be something that you would use up, like you've used up everything else in your life. This is the one thing that will never be used up, and yet you can train in it. You can practice it. You can practice in this ungraspability. So this is the good news. It's like the saying, we're falling is the bad news, and the good news is there's no bottom. There's nothing to attain, but we can let go because of that. And I thought this was a wonderful reminder, stepping into sesshin, or stepping into any period of practice, or any pause, any microdosing, as Richie would say, that we're not pausing, we're not practicing, we are not practicing to attain something, but to let go of that grasping to attain. And this can be tricky when we put it in scientific terms, because we try and measure it and show outcomes and show that it's working. And, incredible appreciation to Richie for traversing that kind of conundrum. And so Dogen ends this section by saying, study thusness as ungraspable. Inquire about ungraspability in thusness. This thusness, this ungraspability, is not merely concerned with Buddha thoughts. Understanding is ungraspable. Enlightenment is ungraspable. But since it's ungraspable, or we could say unattainable, as we often do, whatever understanding we have of it must not be it. Whatever I've said of it, whatever you've thought of it, isn't it. Any attempt to capture it is a gesture towards an object, or maybe a gesture towards an object that isn't at the end of that gesture. And when we become preoccupied with grasping suchness for ourselves, with having some great realization of some separate infinite pearl of wisdom that we call suchness, this is falling to the sky. And so we use the ground to pick ourselves back up. And so all this talk of suchness, which is a kind of macro dose of suchness, I'm sorry, not quite a microdose, has left us with the need for, I think, some patch of earth. And so I want to end with Dogen's reflection that there is no suchness apart from each other. So he says in The Reality of All Things, 51st fascicle, he says, only a Buddha and a Buddha can thoroughly experience the reality of all things. What is called all things is reality thusness, its original nature thusness, body thusness, root, branch, and beyond thusness. Only a Buddha and a Buddha is the reality of all things, he says. Only a Buddha and a Buddha are splendid just as they are. So let's practice as only a Buddha and 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 a Buddha. Noticing when we fall to the ground, allowing the sky to lift us up. Noticing when we fall into the sky and touching the earth to find our bearings. Whether we're in sesshin or we're in the supermarket, wherever we find ourselves, returning continuously to this experience of life in time, unfolding as suchness. Thank you, everyone. We can now take questions. No, I went too far for that. Next time.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, in the back.
Sky and space is often the same as emptiness, shunyata.
Yeah.
I happen to know, is that?
It's not Pali or Sanskrit, which I'd be more familiar with, so I don't know what he's translating, how that translates.
You can't stand up from the ground
without emptiness. I mean, that's what he's saying, clearly. The sky, the space, emptiness. Any other questions? Burning comments? Ready for sesshin? So thank you, everyone who joined us. And if you're joining us for our sits, to know that they may look different. We'll be chanting at the end of the afternoon sit, the Metta Sutta, so you'll hear that. We'll be in the flow of sesshin. And I really appreciate the opportunity to give a talk tonight and practice with all of you in this way.